Just waiting for everybody to join in. It's 4 minutes and only 2 participants, so I'm just waiting for have some kind of quorum. Hey everyone, hey Jordan, thanks for joining in. I'm just gonna start this meeting. It looks like a short meeting and only two of us today. So I think Tim is unwell, so he may not be joining us. And I have some updates with respect to the docs because we had some SIG release discussed the ideas around in this docs and how this doc has changed. I'll probably explain a little. That's the only agenda item I have together. And since this is getting recorded, welcome to another edition of Working Group LTS meeting. We follow CNCF Code of Guidelines. That means please be awesome to each other and be respectful. Am I forgetting anything else? This meeting will be recorded and will be posted online. So don't share anything you don't want your grandchildren to hear you say. That's it from me. And I'll just, Jordan, did you get a chance to look at this doc before?
I'm clicking on the link and it's not, I'm getting an error accessing it. Can you make sure the link is right?
Okay, just give me a sec.
Yeah, I hadn't actually seen this
doc yet. Yeah. It was posted in the last meeting and it was discussed.
Oh.
I think you were on vacation.
I was at the office. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I see the link below.
I've added it again just for, yeah, it should work. The link should work now. So yeah, I think the draft is up. The only change I have made from the last meeting to now is I changed the heading that said prerequisites to possible more improvements for the lack of better English. I call it as prerequisites, saying, okay, if we want to extend, we probably should do a lot more work around this and connect them to different SIGs to say, okay, how this proposal is going to help. So we went from 9 to 4 months is the base idea on this proposal, just for rehash of anyone who's not had yet seen this. Same concept, increase it by 12 months and the 2 months of upgrade period, overlap period where the release team takes time to actually deprecate the job, so we can use that extra period as period where we can provide a separate support period of release. I divided that as 12 plus 2 to just make sure that 12 months is the full supported release, and maybe the 2 months can be something that says, okay, we provide minimal support there, critical bugs. I don't know how the patch release team's policies are not yet well defined. So how we do that right now is I'm not sure what the written policy is. When I see the older patch releases, sometimes even bug fixes made it in those extra 2 weeks, and sometimes very, very critical bugs were only pushed. However, we need to support all this with data. So one of the things I'm going to do is add some The to-do section is where I'm gonna provide how last 3 releases and were 9 months and what was done in those 2 months, what kind of patches were released. So that's an action item on me. I'm gonna assign this to myself to do. But there are other sections here. I am really interested API stability and in fruit test infra tests, tooling around patching and release. I think if you're adding one more release, probably more automation around patching and release would be appreciated to reduce the burden. Right now, the release management, release engineering team is huge, and it's well staffed. So maybe there is good scope to scope out all problems there and then channelize them. One confusion I had was this document was becoming a prescriptive model, and it's titled as KEP. KEPs are used for something that you can decide whether you want to do or not in this release. The idea I wanted to say was, hey, we as a group felt like these are the areas of improvement, and we detailedly explain what these improvements mean. Not how to implement them yet, but what do they mean? And that two definitions and KEP did not match entirely. So I thought, let's collect all the thoughts here in the document and then move out whatever we don't want in the KEP as when we actually take it to SIG Arch or SIG release finally. This was proposed in SIG release last week. We did discuss this. I saw it on the agenda. I think Tim added it, and I was not sure. I mean, we got early feedback from everyone. That was a good positives from it. I think the N-2 upgrades and the two introduced ideas here were let's increase the cycle and N-2 upgrades. The N-2 upgrades brought a lot of comments because I think there is an anxiety about, hey, upgrades aren't even stable. N-1 upgrades aren't even stable yet. So how can you even think about N-2 upgrades kind of? But I think it was a new idea, and the reason is because as we increase the number of releases, it's easier if you have N-2 upgrades. You can jump and reach to the latest one faster, cover the technical debt.
I actually kind of disagree with that. I think if like either the upgrades are automated or they aren't. And if they're automated, then letting the automated process take you through step by step is not more difficult than jumping twice, like jumping 2 times or 4 times. If it's automated, it's automated. If it's being done by hand, then that's the real problem, not the number of jumps you make.
So one of the reasons I made this was when I managed my clusters in my past life, I had automated, my team had automated a lot of portions of the upgrades. The bigger problem was the downtimes that each upgrade would take. Making N-1 upgrades, like if you have 4 releases, you are making 4 upgrades to just catch up, or you just make 2 upgrades and you just stop there because saying that, okay, I can't make more upgrades because it's costing me downtimes. I had about 50 to 80 nodes in my cluster, and making those upgrades were getting expensive and downtimes were not liked. So we used to stop upgrades, and then whenever upgrades used to come back again, I mean, it wasn't about the clean upgrades because I had the tooling around it, not the Kube ADM, but something else custom written that would match the solution or the reason why the cluster was getting used.
Are you referring to workloads running on the cluster that could not remain available while draining from one node to another?
Yeah, they have to go down 4 times, and you wait for the whole upgrade cycle. Like if you have 80 nodes, it takes about a significant period of time to do the upgrades. It all depends on how you're doing the upgrades. But
that to me, that seems like a mismatch. It seems like an application that is expecting to be highly available, but is not architected in a way that allows it to run on 2 nodes at the same time. So like bringing up a new node of the new version and then draining a node of the old version, like that allows applications that can run on multiple nodes and be highly available. Like they shouldn't be getting downtime. And if Kubernetes doesn't make it possible, to upgrade a cluster and upgrade nodes, node pools, in a way that allows applications to remain available, again, that seems like the fundamental problem. So
yeah,
like automated upgrades and allowing upgrades with applications that remain available, those are like goals that I think everyone would be interested in achieving. The N-2 thing, in order to work around those other two not being available, that doesn't seem valuable to me.
So I think the kind of services that we're running where, maybe POJOs, plain on Java objects, older services that were not written for that, but we're moving for the rest of the benefits of using Kubernetes. There were TPRs, third-party resources. Yeah, that was like long ago before they were renamed and re-architected to CRDs. But there were TPRs that were actually using Kubernetes core stuff, and upgrades were difficult. Their downtimes were scalability wise, there was issues because we didn't have as much hardware to add like 10 nodes, 20 nodes to an 80 node cluster to just say, okay, I'm going to take 10 down at a time. We only had 5 or 6 down, so number of services that could actually fail over was less. Because if you had like 100, 200 services running there, then taking down all of replicas of that, you need as much capacity for them to shape out again. And then we had staging clusters which were running mocks of those. We used to use audit APIs to figure out what was getting axed, which kind of objects were running, and run them from ingress to everything, and try to figure out to do the whole upgrades in staging first before we're doing production, because we were using in the TPR days when upgrades weren't that well defined. So we were ourselves defining what to upgrade first and stuff. Mm-hmm. It used to take 3 months or 4 months of exercise to just figure out what's the right version to stop at, because it was expensive and there was a huge anxiety to do upgrades. I mean, so we were like thinking of currency. If I wanted to read $100 dollars or 100 rupees, then I would say, okay, 1, 2, 5, these are the, if I use this denominations, I can create a change of this. There will not be many. I don't have to keep 100 rupee coin, 1 cent or $1 coins of 100. I can actually keep less coins, but then I don't want to have $20 coins or $50 coins. I want to have only $5, $2 coins. So there is a balance between weight, and I don't want to do N-4 upgrades right now. I don't think that's the right way. But N-2 upgrades gives you that 1 and 2 combination where number of upgrades is still 3, and that's where I was thinking. But I think
the problem is that the API server version, the lowest API server version and the highest API server version, the newest API server in the cluster can only allow data to be persisted that the oldest API server version can preserve. Mm-hmm. And so right now, that means that every API change can't be enabled until at least one version has passed. And so if you increase the supported SKU, that means that an API field introduced in one version could not be enabled for as many versions of SKU as you wanted to support. And so you're talking about increasing the time to enable a feature to 6 months or 2 releases or 3 releases or 4 releases. Like
2 releases right now. But I think when I compare that, if it's something has been released stable,
we're not talking about stable. We're talking about even enabled as beta. Like it has to be completely disabled.
Those could be completely stated that this is not covered in the beta policy. If it's beta, then it will be changing. That could be, I totally agree with that. If something is beta and it needs to change, I mean, the reason they're alpha and beta.
That's not safe to do. Like if it's one thing to just kind of say it's beta, it can change. But if we say we support 2-level SKU, then that means that
only stable versions. I mean, that's the reason why we call them stable and beta and alpha, right? I mean, they may not work as expected. They might change.
But saying that and then shipping default configurations that result in data loss and invalid API objects isn't okay. Like the default configurations we ship have to not cause data loss. Like we can't say it can't just be a warning and say if you do this, you might trash your etcd data. That's not okay.
It's the same thing if you have one release also, right? I mean, if you are
that's
using beta release.
That's why we don't allow the data in the first release where the field exists. So we add the field to the schema. We make sure that version N can persist it and round trip it. But we don't allow you to create objects containing that data by default. And that's why. So that you can't get data into etcd accidentally that will get dropped by the previous version of the API server. So our default configurations don't cause data loss. That's why we do it the way we do it. And so if you increase the skew, then in order to continue having our default configurations not cause data loss, we have to increase the time to start using a new feature as many releases as you want to support skew. So it kills like feature velocity. It makes it take like an extra 3 or 6 months to implement a feature.
Yeah, I got to understand. So as a beta feature, the default options are never inside the database. But if I switch it to a custom option, where is it persisted?
I'm not sure I'm following.
You just said that the default options are not persisted in etcd.
So by default, alpha features are disabled.
Okay.
So by default, any alpha field in the API cannot have data persisted in it. And if you try like validation, the object has to be valid without that alpha field, and it won't be persisted in etcd.
And the betas?
And beta typically enables by default, but that is done after a release, so that there's always the oldest API server in the cluster always is able to round trip that data. So if you have a skewed cluster where you have a N+1 API server and you persist data in that beta field, the oldest server in the cluster, the level N1, can interpret it and round trip it and validate it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I mean, I think it's worth asking questions. I agree that until we have one version skew well tested, we can't even consider two version skew.
I think it's good to propose. I think it's good to say this is a. I would like to say from practical implement. If you could put the practical implementation aside, if this looks like a good idea, even say 10 years later, I'm just thinking loud, saying that okay, if you think this idea is good, maybe there should be somewhere documented saying this seems like something that should be done. But I understand there was also in the last meeting mentioned that N-2 upgrades is a far-fetched idea right now.
Yeah, I don't see it near the top of the list priority-wise. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure that I think it's a great idea. I'd rather see the availability and automated upgrades improved than have two modes of upgrading, skipping variable numbers of versions. In any case, I think it is unrelated to adding a supported release.
Mm-hmm. So when we add a new release, right? If you say I was in the oldest release right now, and we add one more release now, you are supported for another 3 months. That's the only time you get that extra 3 months. If you stay behind always, you have to always upgrade in every 3 months. The N-2 also helps you jump faster and get take the benefit of the added release.
But that's true today as well. So N-2 lets you upgrade faster, but it doesn't, like I said, it's orthogonal to how many releases are supported at a time.
Okay. All right. So drafts out there. I think there are sections for API stability. There is nothing else. And I mean, those are the only 2 big points which are already covered here.
Yeah. This isn't, I know one of the things we've talked about is better test coverage around different versions. It's not exactly LTS related, but a couple of things came up recently with validation. And I'm looking at a way to indicate in the API definitions whether a field is alpha level or not, and then drive some skew testing in an automated way off of that. We kind of have a chicken and egg problem with if it's possible to write good tests around skew, but you have to know you need to write them to write them.
Yeah.
And if you don't know you need to write them, then you also probably aren't aware of the issues that need to be tested. And so, yeah, I'm looking at a way to put that in the schema so that all you have to do is say, this is an alpha level field. And then tests automatically say, oh, well, you have to give me an object with data and without data, and then it'll exercise upgrade, downgrade, enable, disable type of scenarios automatically.
Yeah, I think the document was not exactly saying yearly support cadence is the only proposal, or this is the, because it's a KEP, I think ultimately we will have to trim out some things that will not be implementable immediately. But whatever one of the ideas that, well-defined and predictable path from alpha, beta stable and improved test and front tests, both were trying to cover saying that, okay, we don't test upgrades well, we don't validate alpha, beta stable well, we need to be more predictable there. So this was another way of, but yeah, those are to-dos because I think there are other smarter and better people who can write those sections better than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're modifying this, just add yourself as an author at the top. I think I followed the same mechanism that KEP does. That's the best way we discussed. Right. Yeah, I think for 2 people, we have taken 27 minutes already. Yeah. Thanks, Jordan. I think there's nothing else on the agenda, and follow up on the document. Bye-bye. Thanks.